He bought a storage unit for $500. What was inside changed everything. Most of the time you're lucky if you break even. But sometimes, just sometimes, you hit the jackpot. Don Dotson thought he was just buying some old furniture, maybe some boxes of junk. You know how these storage auctions go, right? What he found inside that dusty 10x10 storage unit would make him question everything he thought he knew about luck, karma, and whether some secrets are meant to stay buried. And Don hit something way bigger than a jackpot. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happened next is going to blow your mind. The previous owner had stopped paying rent months ago, and now everything inside was up for grabs. This guy's been in the game for years, and he's got an eye for value. You know, those reality shows about storage wars. Dan's been doing this since way before it was cool on TV. But here's the thing about Don. He's got this gut instinct, and something about this unit just felt different. Other bidders drop out around $300, and then it's just Dan and this one other guy going back and forth. Finally, Don throws out $500 and the other guy walks away. The auction hunter inside. Stacks and stacks of cash. Not just a few $100s. We're talking serious money. In cash. But Dan's got a conscience. And that's where this story gets really interesting. Sitting in a storage unit that he bought for $500, legally, it's yours. You bought the storage unit fair and square, and whatever's inside belongs to you. That's how storage auctions work. But Dan starts thinking about the person who lost all this money. Her family had no idea she'd been stashing cash in a storage unit. But here's the thing. He had no legal obligation to give it back. None whatsoever. They'd been grieving their loss, dealing with funeral expenses, and had simply forgotten about the storage unit rental payments. Dan later said his hands were literally shaking as he counted it. Some furniture that might be worth a couple $100. Boxers of old clothes. Nothing special. Alright, let's set the scene. Don Dotson isn't your typical storage unit buyer. So there he is, standing outside this storage facility in California, watching the auctioneer cut the lock on unit 247. Don peers into the dim space with his flashlight. He sees the usual stuff. Furniture covered in sheets. Some boxes stacked against the wall. Nothing too exciting. The thing was locked tight. And Dan's thinking, alright, this might be where the good stuff is. The bidding starts at $100. $500 for a storage unit that would change his life forever. The first look. Okay, so Don gets the keys and starts going through his new purchase. First thing he finds, pretty standard stuff. But then he gets to this heavy wooden chest pushed way back in the corner. And I mean heavy, like it took two guys to move it. He gets the lock off, opens it up, and his jaw just drops. $7.5 million. Now here's where most people would probably do a little happy dance. Pay off their mortgage. Maybe buy a nice car. The moral dilemma. So picture this. You've just found $7.5 million in cash. He starts going through some documents he found in the chest, trying to piece together who this money belonged to. And what he discovers makes his stomach turn. The money belonged to an elderly woman who had recently passed away. Here's this family who probably could really use this money. And Dan's sitting on what's essentially their inheritance. The phone call now. Don could have just kept quiet, taken the money and never looked back. But that's not who Don is. He decides to track down the family. And let me tell you, this wasn't easy. The woman had kept her financial affairs pretty private. After some serious detective work, Don manages to find a phone number for the woman's daughter. Can you imagine getting that phone call? Hi, you don't know me, but I bought your mother's storage unit, and I found something that belongs to you. The daughter thought it was a scam at first. I mean, who wouldn't? Some random guy calls you up claiming he found millions of dollars that belonged to your dead mother. It sounds like something out of a movie. But Dan was persistent. He provided details that only someone who had actually been in that storage unit would know. Slowly, the daughter started to believe him. The backstory unfolds as Dan learned more about this woman. The story got even more incredible. Turns out she was a child of the Great Depression. You know how people from that generation sometimes didn't trust banks. Well, this woman took that to the extreme. She'd been saving cash for decades, literally hiding money in coffee cans, under mattresses, and apparently in storage units. Her family knew she was frugal, but they had no idea she was sitting on millions of dollars. The daughter explained that her mother had become increasingly paranoid about the government and banks in her later years. She'd started converting everything to cash and hiding it in various places. The storage unit was just one of several hiding spots. But here's the really sad part. The woman had developed dementia in her final years. She'd forgotten about most of her hiding places, including the storage unit. When she passed away, that information died with her. The meeting Don arranges to meet the family in person. And this is where the story gets really emotional. He shows up with a duffel bag containing $7.5 million in cash, just hands it over. The daughter starts crying. The son is in complete shock. Here's this stranger who could have legally kept their mother's life savings, and he's just giving it back because it's the right thing to do. But Don doesn't walk away empty-handed. The family insists on giving him a reward. They offer him $1.2 million. Now, some people might think that's not enough, right? I mean, he found $7.5 million, but Don thought it was more than fair. Actually, Don thought it was too much. He tried to negotiate it down, but the family wouldn't hear of it. They said without Dan, They never would have seen a penny of their mother's money. The twist, but wait, because this story has one more twist. Remember how I said the woman had multiple hiding spots? Well, Dan's discovery led the family to start looking for other places their mother might have stashed money. They found another $2 million hidden in the walls of a house, coffee cans buried in the backyard with another $500,000. This woman had been sitting on almost $10 million total, and nobody knew. The family ended up inheriting way more than they ever imagined. And it all started because Don Dotson decided to do the right thing with that first $7.5 million. The ripple effect Dan's story spread pretty quickly through the storage auction community. Some people called him crazy for giving back all that money. Others called him a hero. But Dan says he sleeps better at night knowing he did the right thing. The family stayed in touch with Don. They've become close friends, actually. The daughter told reporters that Don restored her faith in humanity during one of the darkest periods of her life, and at $1.2 million reward. Dan used part of it to expand his business, but he also donated a significant portion to charity, specifically two organizations that help elderly people manage their finances and avoid financial abuse. The broader impact. This story sparked a whole conversation about what happens to unclaimed money and belongings when people pass away. Turns out there are billions of dollars sitting in storage units, safe deposit boxes, and forgotten accounts across the country. Some states have started programs to help reunite families with unclaimed property. Dan's story became a case study in ethics classes at several universities. It raised questions about finders, keepers, laws, and moral obligations. But for Don, it was never about the money or the recognition. He just knew what felt right in his gut. The psychology of hoarding wealth. What's fascinating about this story? The psychology behind why someone would hide millions of dollars instead of putting it in a bank. Experts say it's more common than you'd think, especially among people who'd lived through economic hardship. The Great Depression created a whole generation of people who fundamentally didn't trust financial institutions. They'd rather have their money where they could see it and touch it, even if it meant taking huge risks. This woman wasn't irrational. She was traumatized. Her behavior made perfect sense given her life experiences. And unfortunately, when dementia set in, that survival strategy became a liability. The legal aspects from a legal standpoint. Don was under no obligation to return the money. Storage auction laws are pretty clear. Whatever you buy becomes your property. But Dan's case has actually influenced some proposed legislation about cooling off periods for storage auctions. Some lawmakers argue there should be more time for families to claim belongings before they go to auction, especially when the original renter has passed away. Dan's story is often cited in these discussions. But Don himself says the law isn't what matters. It's what you can live with. And he couldn't live with keeping money that clearly belonged to a grieving family. Where are they now? So what happened to everyone involved? Dan continued his storage auction business, but he's a lot more careful about going through personal items now. He's found several more situations where he's been able to return sentimental items to families. Though nothing quite as dramatic as the $7.5 million, the family used their inheritance to pay off debts, help their kids with college, and set up a scholarship fund in their mother's name. They said it's what she would have wanted. And that storage facility, they've actually put up a plaque commemorating Dan's act of kindness. It's become something of a local legend. The ripple effect continues. Dan's story inspired other storage auction buyers to be more thoughtful about personal items they find. There's now an informal network of auction buyers who help reunite families with lost belongings. One buyer found a box of military medals and spent months tracking down the veteran's family. Another found adoption papers and helped someone connect with their birth family. Dan's example showed people that sometimes the real treasure isn't money. It's doing the right thing. The human element. You know what strikes me most about this story? It's not really about the money. It's about the choice Dan made when nobody was watching. He could have kept that cash and no one would have ever known. But he chose compassion over profit. In a world where we're constantly hearing about people doing terrible things for money, Dan's story reminds us that there are still good people out there. People who understand that some things are more valuable than cash. The daughter told me in an interview that Dan didn't just give them back their inheritance. He gave them back their faith in humanity. And honestly, I think that's worth more than $7.5 million. The final thoughts. So, the next time you're at a storage auction, or really any situation where you could benefit at someone else's expense, remember Don Dotson. Remember that sometimes the right choice isn't the profitable choice. Dan often says he got the better end of the deal. He traded $7.5 million for something priceless, a clear conscience and the knowledge that he helped a family during their darkest hour. The $1 million storage unit turned out to be worth way more than money. It was worth everything. If this story restored your faith in humanity even a little bit, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Dan's situation? And make sure you're subscribed because we've got more incredible true stories coming your way. Stories about ordinary people who made extraordinary choices. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the real treasure is the choice you make when nobody's looking.